Hello, I'm Alan Pettico, Executive Director for the Southern California Rental Housing Association. I'm here again today with another one of our longtime members. This is a developer member and independent owner, so they develop and they own and manage their properties themselves. So Kurt, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Kurt Sullivan, Vice President of Property Management for Douglas Allred Company. We're a private company here in San Diego, and we have both multifamily and commercial properties. Two properties right now in San Diego, multifamily, and about 3.5 million feet in the Phoenix area. I came on initially managing 3,300 units of multifamily in the mid-2000s and transitioned into responsibility for the commercial portfolio as well when we took advantage of the condo conversion craze back in the mid to late 2000s and divested of most of our multifamily portfolio. But we still have two significant properties, almost 500 units here in San Diego, and I deal with those and my on-site staffs managing them.
What was your background before you came to the industry, and what led you to the industry?
Well, I was 20 years with the Han Company, which was the largest developer of regional malls in California and the sixth largest in the country. I was an on-site mall manager for 11 years, and then I went on to head up the property management division of the major market portfolio, large 1 million to 1.5 million square foot super regional shopping centers located across the country. And I did that for about 8 years until the company decided to sell off the mall portfolio, and I closed down the San Diego operation. After about a year of considering things, I had the opportunity to come on to Douglas Allred Company. And prior to then, I had never managed multifamily, but I saw a lot of similarities in the mall business, particularly with the independent mom and pop operators. I was dealing with people who their lives depended on what they did every day, as opposed to large national and sometimes international companies. And I like that aspect. I like the people-to-people aspect of the business. Doug Allred, who is the founder of our company, and I met, and he said, "Tell me, why do you want to take on multifamily management?" And I gave it a little thought, and I said to him, "It strikes me there are two types of people who live in apartment communities. There are those who must live there because they don't have any other choice, and those who choose to live there because of the lifestyle that it offers. For the first group, I'd like to make a difference by making that experience pleasant and have it come through with something that is not just something they have to do, but something that they are fulfilled in doing. For the second group that chooses it because they don't want everything that comes with home ownership and that, I felt there was an opportunity to make good on a promise that there could be a very pleasant, happy, and fulfilling life." And that's really what it has been, is the opportunity to take a place that people spend most of their time and make it pleasant. One of my colleagues from the mall industry asked me, "How do you like it and what's it like?" And I told him, and he said, "Wow, it sounds like everything we have to deal with except they never go home." And I said, "That's right. They are home."
Yeah.
So I enjoy the personal nature, that you can make a difference with something that really matters to people.
Yeah, that's interesting because the way you say that, because I started off as a renter because I had to, and eventually I was able to buy my starter home, and then I moved up to my next home, and after living there for about 15 years, my wife and I decided we wanted to go back to the multifamily living, and we recently moved back into multifamily selling off our home. And it was for those reasons. Honestly, we didn't want to do the maintenance, and we didn't want to be responsible for all those sort of things, but also what we found is the amenities are better here. We have access to a lot more amenities, and we're more central to things. And quite honestly, in the short time we've lived in our place here, we've gotten to know our neighbors much better than 15 years living in a single family tract. We rarely saw our neighbors. So that's an interesting comment. I appreciate you saying that. Before you got into this industry, so you were in the military, weren't you? Weren't you a pilot?
I wasn't in the military, but I was a pilot.
Okay.
I'm one of those types. Aviation always held fascination for me, and I wanted to be a pilot. And I learned to be a pilot on my own without the military. Went on to become a flight instructor and a charter pilot. And the interesting thing about that is that while I was seeking to continue a career in aviation, the times back in the early 80s were very tight. There were a lot of pilots coming out of the military, and the airlines preferred them. So I was not able to make the jump into commercial aviation, which is what I wanted.
Yeah.
Fortunately, one of my students that I trained to fly invited me to lunch as a thank you, congratulations, when he received his license. And he said to me, I work for a company, as you know, that builds and manages regional shopping centers. And over the last year, I've really enjoyed our time together. And I think you'd make a great mall manager. And I chuckled a bit and I said to him, that's funny, because I never even considered that those things had managers. I looked at them as extensions of a city. And he said, no, they very much do have managers and complete staffs. And it took about a year for me to call him back. And when I did, I said, is the offer still good to explore? And it was at that time in the mid-'80s that the mall business was exploding. You could build a mall anywhere. In fact, the Hahn Company opened 2 regional malls on the same day, one in Bakersfield, one in Fresno. That's how fertile the development picture was at that time. So I came in at a time when there was a lot of opportunity. I call it the freewheeling time, where malls did not all look the same. You had the opportunity to encounter a lot of really interesting retailers and concepts before the consolidation, before the sameness came about. Yeah. And I enjoyed that a lot. It set up an almost 20-year career for me. But still today, when I see an airplane go by, my eyes are drawn to it. And if you get me talking about aviation, that's a dicey thing, because I don't stop in a short time.
Well, I like to ask that question because I've only known a handful of people who grew up and came directly into this industry purposely. And it tends to be because their family was already in it, or their parents were in it, and it became something that they wanted to do, as that their parents were a property manager on a property they lived in or something, and then they saw it and they liked it. So it's always interesting to ask that question and figure out how people came to this industry. Housing providers are often seen in a negative light, particularly right now. What do you wish more people knew about housing providers?
Well, it's interesting in the negative light. If you go back through history, I think you're going to find that the words landlord and tenant are things that get people tense. And they should, because when you speak of a landlord and a tenant, you're talking about somebody that simply views their property as a commodity and who views their customer as a money-paying individual. I stress with people that I work with that we speak of owners and we speak of residents. Just as in the mall business, I spoke of owners and merchants. I didn't talk about tenants. A tenant is by definition, it's someone who pays rent and takes up space. But a merchant is someone who buys and sells a product or a commodity for a profit. And a resident is someone that invests their being in a place. So I think that there's still a potential segment out there in the world that thinks in terms of landlord and tenant. I like to think in terms of property owner and resident. And that sets a very nice scene. Why is there a problem? I think there's a misunderstanding sometimes between the two. Uh, Owners are many times viewed as large, powerful, unfeeling entities. They're not human. They're not. They don't have a person or a face to them. But the truth is, we know that small owners are very much human. The risks that they undertake when they invest their finances in a property are many. Screening the right people to do business with you, taking the chance that someone will care for your property and you won't wind up at the end regretting what you did. Taking the risk on vacancy and things like that. Folks do pro formas, they do plans that assume a certain success. When that success doesn't come because of the natural cycle of the industry of people coming and going, or from something external and significant that impacts you, a small owner winds up writing checks at the end of the month and not taking some form of profit from their operations. And that's a very tough thing. I call it you eat what you kill. There is no every other week automatic paycheck. It's literally what you can accomplish. And sometimes you can't accomplish much. Now, if you look on the other side, you've got the large companies. Yes, in some cases, these are very large companies. Some of them do have deep pockets, but every single one of them is probably accountable to individual people who have invested in them. And you really have a situation where these are people doing business with people. These are not people having to do business with large institutions that have endless financial resources. It's usually very tight there. So there can be a misperception. Now, from the owner side, I've met some folks who have the view of a resident. They think of them as tenants, as people who are simply looking to get out of it whatever they can, circumvent rules to their own liking and that. And that's not true either. You've got people that do care about their community. You have, I've seen countless situations where people do things for the community that they don't have to do. There was a very nice lady that had free time, and she liked to sweep the sidewalk, not just in front of her apartment home, but in front of about 4 or 5 buildings. And I said to her once, you don't have to do that. She said, I know that, but I like to do it. It makes my community look better. So there are people behind this. If we can see the people, I think we can see the value on both sides. It'd be nice if there was more of that between both sides of the renting equation.
Most definitely. I mean, that's one of the things that the association grapple with. We're constantly trying to promote what our members are doing out there, members of the industry are doing out there in the community. And I know that some of them are very generous. The ones that have been around for 40, 50, 60 years, you know, there's buildings named all over this town with their names on it and things. And most people don't know who those names really are. There's those that are very generous, but then there's the ones that are just, that do the very small things. I've talked to members who've done Thanksgiving meals for their tenants, residents, and others that partner with their businesses in their community. And you know, it's always encouraged, because what I like to tell our members is that, you know, you're part of the community, and that means not just the property you're working at, but the surrounding community there as well. And so be part of that solution and get out and be involved. If you're near a school, what can you do to help the school? You know, because oftentimes your residents are kids that are going to those schools and things like that. So it's a very important point. How has the Southern California Rental Housing Association helped you manage your rental properties, particularly given right now with the COVID situation going on?
Well, now more than ever, it has proven to be the source for connection and information. I joined the association probably 15 years ago as a board member. Our company had been a member prior to that, but your predecessor reached out and asked me if I would consider joining the board. And I did that. And in the course of that, I've been very glad to contribute where I can in terms of some talent points and adding to the discussion. What comes from it for me is a tremendous connection to the industry that if I did not have that, I would be in the dark about many things. I'll give you a concrete example. If you go back to the annual expo that the Apartment Association holds, the very first meeting for a number of years was a bit of a grab bag briefing that touched on a lot of legal issues. And it was the 8 o'clock meeting. Most of my associates are not there, but I attend the 8 o'clock meeting. And I was sitting in the audience and I was listening to a discussion on the Americans with Disability Act. And I started drifting off a bit because, of course, in my mind, I had it all covered. I generally knew the law. Our properties, our two properties that were affected here in California, preceded ADA. So in my mind, I start thinking grandfathered, don't have to worry about it. But I didn't check out completely. And as the discussion continued, I picked up on the fact that I had a very flawed impression of the concept of grandfathering. And it was explained in the meeting by the presenter that simply because my property was built before ADA was enacted, given the passage of time since the enactment and the responsibility of an owner to consider the elements of that act, I may not be automatically grandfathered. And I'm talking specifically with respect to the access to the leasing office. There were 4 steps to get up into that leasing office. It was not accessible. I realized in listening to that discussion that we had great liability, that we were open for somebody to claim that we were not compliant. And within 3 months, a wheelchair lift was installed. The entry area was analyzed to ensure that we didn't have any obstacles to this publicly invited section of our property.
Yeah.
And had I not been in that meeting, I'm willing to bet today that we would be at risk. That's just one concrete example of how participating in the association, not as a board member, this was walking in and taking a seat in a meeting that had lots of seats because, as you know, the 8 o'clock meeting is not the most popular. And that really taught me that there's value to be had if I'm willing to put in the work to have it. Now, elevate that to the board level. And as you know very well, there are expectations on me. I cannot just come to a meeting, sit there, throw in a few comments and leave. I'm going to be expected to join some kind of a committee and give some real professional effort to it. And I'm going to be expected to prepare for that meeting. There are a lot of things you do as a board member if you do it right. So it's not just a free ride. But in exchange for that, I'm sitting usually with anywhere from 15 to 25 of the top experts in this industry, and I'm listening to them, and they're listening to me, and we're all picking up information that if we didn't make the effort and put the dollars in to invest in the association, we'd simply be a lone wolf. And we've all heard the phrase, you don't know what you don't know. And that's a very true phrase, but it is not a legal excuse. When you take a look now at the COVID time, I would say that not only for my multifamily properties, but also for my commercial properties, much of the way I have approached this crisis in what we've done and what we have initiated has come from information from the Apartment Association. Now, maybe I would have been smart enough to realize I have to start digging elsewhere. But I'm a member. My email box shows me information all the time. And while I may not read cover to cover every email that comes in, I look at every one of them, and it's in that I have found information that I have used to manage this crisis. So it is a key touch point in not being in a cave or not having your head in the sand. I can't stress it enough to people that there's a lot of you don't know what you don't know. And it is surprising sometimes to hear it. It's really gratifying to be able to then act on it.
Yeah, that's one of the things that, I'm probably most particularly proud of. Even when I first came to the association, it was 2003, and we had the horrific wildfires here in San Diego. It looked like Armageddon in and around. People were evacuating into the stadium and things like that. And what we were able to do in terms of getting communications out to our members and providing resources to emergency service, so to help house people whose homes were being burnt down through our members, actually, at that time. And that was basically a spreadsheet and a telephone for us, and having them fax in those resources. I'm particularly proud of how we handle those sort of crises and get the information out very quickly on it. We've been a model to others in the country on that fact, on how we handle it. So I'm always very proud to talk about that. Well, Kurt, thank you so much for taking some time out today. I really appreciate it. Is there anything else you'd just like to say?
I think in terms of our association, when people ask me, what do you like about it, or what is a strong point, the one that I go to all the time is that this is a bottom-up organization. This is not an organization that has a few people sitting at the top dictating to the masses of the organization how they think things should be done, what the issues are that they feel need to be tackled. It is completely opposite. Yeah. If you are an average member, you have as much of a voice here as the largest company representative. And that is an unusual and very valuable thing, because you're hearing about real issues, you're dealing with the real impacts of them, not some removed idea of what the issue might be, or some large company related issue that really doesn't have relevance to the individual members. I hear people at our board meetings and at our regular events and gatherings that day have been sitting with a resident. That day they have been ankle deep in sewage, or they've had to stop somewhere to clean the smoke off their face from having gone to the scene of the apartment fire that they managed. These are not folks who just sit in an office and use their past experience of what they believe the situation to be. These are people that are really doing the work. And to be able to access that kind of information, talent, dedication, and drive from a bottom-up organization, to me, that's worth the price of admission. Both the checkbook part of the admission that you write to be a member, and the human capital to take the time and become part of what's going on. So to me, that's a really critical point. It's a point of difference for our association. The egos are kind of checked at the door by all these folks. And some of these folks have a right to have some pretty big egos because of their time in the industry, because of their accomplishments. And basically, they are simply John and Christine and Kendra, and that they're not high-flying titles. These are real people that are very happy to interact with you and help make you better. So That's really high on my list of value points for our association.
I think that's one of the things I enjoy most about it. As you said, these are all sort of people who roll up their sleeves and get their hands dirty. And actually, most of them all started off that way. They would start off with a single property. They were doing it all themselves. And as they became, things became more stable for them and more successful, they acquired more property. And so they fully understand what it takes to do the maintenance, to run it like a business, and to take care of it, and to take those phone calls at 2 a.m. and to deal with the fire situations and stuff. It's a very unique opportunity, and I'm always grateful for having been able to participate in it with the association. Thanks, Kurt. I really appreciate you taking the time out today and sharing your story with us.
It's my pleasure. Take care, Alan.
Take care. Thanks, everybody. We'll watch for another video soon.